Hi, it's Matt here. I just wanted to add a quick note before this episode. We had quite a few technical issues regarding the sound for this episode, which affects about half of the podcast. For some reason, Skype decided to record everyone else's vocals apart from mine a lot lower than it should have done. So raising those up has caused quite a lot of noise in the recording, and unfortunately it wasn't noticed until after we'd already recorded the commentary for the first two games. So up until about halfway through, the quality is not the best. It's really quite noisy. It's completely down to problems on my end. It's not on the other guys. So I apologize for that, and I hope it doesn't ruin your enjoyment of the episode.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 6 of the Retro Odyssey podcast. I'm Adam, your host as always. I'm joined by Matt, Stephen and Ryan. Hi guys.
Hello.
Hello.
So this week we're continuing our odyssey into all things retro by looking at platforming. That genre was kind of prolific back in the day, so we've chosen 4 games to play from that genre. Before we start, I know that this is kind of a genre that's a bit divisive. So what do you guys think of platforming games as a whole? Personally, I kind of like them.
I do like platformers. It's not exactly my favourite genre, but I find them fun. For the most part, they're quite simple, and I'm into simple, fun, colourful games.
It's such a prolific genre that it's, especially when you, like you said, when you get back into these old games, it's hard to find games that aren't at least a platformer hybrid.
Yeah.
You start going into like the really offshoots like shmups and whatnot, where you start getting away from platform because even some of your running guns are still platformers. I always enjoyed them, but it's really hard to get away from them.
Yeah, me too. I definitely prefer platformers that have a little bit more to them, where they're a little bit more complex than go from left to right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, games like Sonic as well, which, you know, it's kind of got a bit of a gimmick with going fast and things like that. But then you've got games like Alex Kidd, which honestly is just kind of moving through the level and running through the motions. But yeah, as a whole, I kind of generally like them.
I don't know that I've actually said this on any of our recorded episodes, but I hate platformers because I am terrible at them. I utterly despise this genre.
Which is surprising, because I kind of thought there would be a bit of a not very offensive genre, because there's not really much to it. You know, you can get some, boring ones, but I didn't really think there was much to hate about them.
Well, it's mostly the fact that growing up, I wasn't that kid that had 2 games and I played them to death. I actually, because my family bought a bunch of games before I was even born, we had a wealth of games to play, so I didn't have the time to sit down and memorize these platformers, and as a result, I'm still terrible at them today. Like, I've never gotten through the original Super Mario Brothers because I just can't get through.
Well, it's a terrible game, so I don't blame you.
I understand that sentiment because, like, there are platformers I'll pick up and I'm just terrible, but I can play Super Mario Bros. 3 or Mega Man X blindfolded, just about. But it's because it's literally muscle memory at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
It's the same way I am with Link to the Past, where I don't need anything. I could write a book for that game.
Right.
Okay, so let's take a little break and we'll jump straight into Ryan's pick then.
My selection for this month was Joe and Mac. It was the SNES version specifically. Joe and Mac was released on arcade as Joe and Mac Caveman Ninja. And I think other ports of it were just called Caveman Ninja. It's kind of an odd title, but not even sure how it relates. But it's a side-scrolling platforming, kind of a weird hybrid between a You could almost count it as a Contra-style shoot-'em-up, but then also you have a club, so you can beat 'em up too. It is definitely an interesting one, but it's one that I played as a kid. My best friend had it. We played it all the time and never beat it. So for this episode, I actually beat it. But essentially, the theme of the game is all the cave women have been scared off from the tribe, and Joe and Mac are the cool ones. So you have to go out and beat up a whole bunch of Neanderthals and dinosaurs and save all the women.
Yeah, I mean, what's with Joe and Mac anyway? Because, like, the art style, I kind of like mostly. But then the art style for Joe and Mac themselves is just kind of weird. I find the faces is a bit weird and off.
It's a little weird.
Yeah, I didn't really like it. I like the art style in the game for, like, the levels and stuff, and particularly the bosses. But wasn't too keen on Joe and Mac themselves.
Personally, I think the art style tied together pretty well myself. I thought the sprites looked like they fit on the background quite well.
Yeah, I thought it looked pretty nice.
It was certainly very colourful.
It's very colorful and bright. And the sprites, which is funny because this is a port of an arcade game, the sprites are insanely good for a Super Nintendo title.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, particularly the bosses. The bosses, really beautiful to look at. I would kind of compare it to maybe the bosses in Chuck Rock. Apart from, I would say that these ones look a little bit better. But they're all very interesting.
Who here actually made it all the way through?
I didn't. I got like halfway and then I watched the rest on YouTube.
Yeah, I got all the way through.
So you know the plight of the difficulty curve kind of bouncing all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially with the final boss, I mean, I save scummed my way through.
I also had to spam the save state right on that final boss just because it just took so long.
What is with that final boss as well?
I have no clue.
Isn't it just like the Red Erema from Ghouls and Ghosts?
His name is Sick Devil, is his official name, but it seems so odd because you fight a dinosaur, then you go inside of a dinosaur, and then you fight the devil, when you know the devs were on drugs.
Thematically, it kind of jumps the shark at that point.
Well, I don't know, because earlier in the game you fight Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors. So it is a bit weird all the way through, because you've got like dinosaurs and mammoths and things like that. And then you've got a Venus Mantrap and, as I say, the Red Erema.
Which is a little horrifying with the mammoth, because first you break its tusks off, and then you break his trunk off. That was a bit of an odd one.
I thought the boss fights were probably the highlight of the game, to be honest. The actual platforming was a bit kind of mediocre, but the boss fights were kind of neat.
I was going to say the exact same thing. I didn't enjoy the platforming sections, but most of the boss fights, apart from one or two, I really, really enjoyed, especially the pterodactyls. I like both the pterodactyl boss fights.
That was a cool fight. But the floating is pretty jumpy, and I think that's probably the reason why I didn't like the platforming so much. It kind of felt hard to judge where your jumps were going to go. On the first level, I jumped over this one bit and just landed in a pit because I couldn't really control myself.
It's once you're off the ground, it's very mushy. It is not tight at all.
Yeah.
On the ground, it's relatively tight, but once you're airborne, you're kind of up for a crapshoot. There's one section on the last or second to last level, out of all whopping 10 of them, that you have to jump across a bunch of little tiny platforms. And I had to state my way through that one too, just because it was so easy to miss the platform.
Yeah.
Is that the lava kind of stage?
No, I think it's the last level before you go and fight the devil. Not before you go inside the dinosaur.
All right.
One thing that does kind of save it is the death mechanics kind of interesting, because you die and then you float up as an angel and kind of choose your respawn location.
Yeah.
Really neat, and I liked it a lot.
Now, there were a couple interesting things about specifically the Super Nintendo edition. Did anybody here play the Genesis edition?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
Okay, so the Super Nintendo port does a couple things differently. It introduced a save map, or not a save map, but the overworld map, so you can kind of see where you're going. And with that, like the special bonus areas that are behind locked doors, that wasn't in the original game or the Genesis, and I also believe Amiga port. On the flip side, what it did was it took away like about half the weapons, and it removed a charged weapon attack, which was really weird. In the arcade port, you can actually like charge up and throw like a big wheel or a big boomerang.
Never mind, at least you can roll into enemies.
Yeah.
I found a lot of the weapons to be really frustrating. I mean, I didn't find the responsiveness of them great, but in terms of kind of like all the different weapons, I found them a bit dull and slow and boring.
Yeah, I found that the bone was the best weapon.
Yeah.
Or at least my favourite.
I enjoyed the bone as well.
I found that once I got going, I relied almost entirely on the wheel, because you can throw two of them ahead, run something over with one, and as long as there's not a bottomless pit in front of you, that wheel will keep rolling up and down walls and keep crushing stuff.
That's pretty cool.
That's pretty useful.
I found that the bone was kind of reminiscent of the original Wonder Boy, and I suppose, was it Adventure Island on the SNES?
Yeah, we throw hammers.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of that with the throwing arc.
Definitely an interesting title. One that now that even that I beat it, I haven't played this game in 20 years or better. I still had a good time.
Yeah, I mean, it was fine. It wasn't like fantastic or anything, but it was solid. One thing I'll say though is that the music was kind of forgettable. Like after I finished playing it, I couldn't remember any of it.
I think there's like two songs. There's like the bonus level theme and the level theme. Oh, and then boss music. So they put a whole lot of work there.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the boss music was kind of okay, but to be honest, I don't really remember any of it, as I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm. No,
what
fair.
are the sequels like?
I know that there are 2 sequels, but I actually haven't played them. I might have to put that on my to-do list now.
Because I know that there was a cartridge released actually recently with all 3 of them on.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Huh.
Data East put it out.
Did that, didn't they?
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, I do know is in Joe and Mac 2 or Joe and Mac 3, like the art got a little weird, I believe. Or maybe it was just the box art got really wonky. No, it's fair to say that I don't know if anybody played with a friend, but Joe and Mac is a 2-player game. It's called like it's like Super 2-player or whatever, and it's co-op, so you can beat the hell out of everything with a buddy. And that's how I always played as a kid.
Yeah, I saw that 2-player, but I didn't try it.
Yeah, neither did I.
I suppose the key question is this an expensive game to buy?
That is a good question. I have never actually looked. I'm taking a look right now, and it's looking about $15.
In-box or unboxed?
That is unboxed. Looks like 15 to 25 is what I'm looking at here.
Yeah, I'm seeing them go for like 20 quid. Yeah. It's not the cheapest, but it's not too bad.
I don't know about that price, considering it is a very short game, and there's not even a whole lot of secrets involved. There's the bonus areas, but most of them are like fight a boss again and just get like lots of health for it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would pay that amount for it, even if I had a SNES.
Yeah, me neither, especially since I only really like the boss fights.
You can get the Data ETH collection, all 3 games, for $33, so that'd be a better deal.
Yeah, definitely. So what's everyone's opinion on the game? Did everyone like it to varying degrees? I mean, Stephen, what do you reckon?
I mean, I thought it was all right. I wasn't really over the moon about it, but I, also was fully expecting that because we're dealing with platformers. It's not something I'm gonna be going back to over and over and over again. I might give it another shot to see if I can get further along.
It's an average platformer, just brought up slightly by having decent boss fights. If there was some kind of boss rush mode, then I would probably enjoy it a lot more.
I mean, I have nostalgia goggles on when I play this game, so I like it more than its than it probably deserves. So my opinion is definitely a touch biased here. I'm not going to say it's the greatest game ever, but I'd probably give it an extra star just because I had played it when I was a kid.
Yeah, nostalgia often helps with some games. But definitely not a bad game, at least. I mean, it's definitely one to maybe just play.
It's no TNT.
Well, yeah.
Very few things are.
Right, so if we've wrapped up here, we'll take another break and we'll move on to another game. My pick for this topic is Symphony of the Night. So it was released in 1997 for the PlayStation, and there was a Saturn version releasing the next year. And it also had HD ports about 10 years later, which saw on XBLA, PSN, and I think the PlayStation Portable as well.
Well, the PlayStation Portable version is it's combined with Rondo of Blood, I believe. It's the Dracula X Chronicles.
Ah, okay. I saw that on Wikipedia it listed PSP. I didn't know if it just got released like separately on some kind of store or anything.
No, it's a combination game. Let me pull it up here. I know because it's in my list of stuff to get.
Right, fair enough. That explains it. So yeah, I mean, it was kind of an interesting game anyway, because it was a big shift in the series. I don't know if you've ever played any of the earlier Castlevania games, but they were a sort of linear 2D action kind of platformer. And then
One
they
level
changed
at a time.
Yeah, I mean, like the old ones I really like, but then they changed it into this like sprawling Metroid-style epic.
Yeah.
Kind of weird as well, because the game wasn't actually successful at first, because apparently it had like really shit marketing. But because like the critics loved it and there was a lot of word of mouth, then it just became like so well loved.
Yeah, this is definitely one that
continued. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely one that blew up after its initial launch.
Yeah, I mean they continued in that format pretty much from that point on until, well, maybe until like Lords of Shadow, maybe.
Well, I mean, you have to remember this is the Vania from Metroidvania.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you had like Metroid, which did that kind of thing before, ever since like the original, and then as soon as Symphony of the Night got released, it then kind of transformed into this Metroidvania kind of genre.
Yeah,
That's how influential it was.
Symphony of the Night definitely established what it helped establish not only what Super Metroid put into place with its layout and map system,
Yeah.
but it really defined what Castlevania would become, because like one of my favorite Castlevania games is Harmony of Dissonance, and honestly it's more like Symphony of the Night remix. There's a whole bunch of them that are like that, where you can tell exactly where they took almost a play-by-play from Symphony of the Night.
Yeah.
But that's not a bad thing because the game is excellent.
Yeah. I mean, what also is kind of interesting too is that it's actually a direct sequel to an earlier Castlevania game. Because like the game starts out with the final boss from Rondo of Blood.
Yeah, that's why they paired it with they paired them for the PSP release.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But it's weird because the prologue's called Bloodlines, and Bloodlines is a completely different Castlevania game that has no relation to this title. So it kind of feels like a bit of a misnomer, to be honest, more than anything.
I mean, I think that was entirely down to Japan's usual thing of, oh, the Americans won't understand this because they didn't get that game, so they just, whacked a word with blood in instead of just putting Rondo of Blood.
Yeah.
Yeah, because wasn't Bloodlines the Mega Drive one?
Yes.
It was. And that is also a fantastic game, which we kind of need to cover at one point.
Oh, we'll get to it.
But yeah, I mean, Rondo of Blood, it was on the PC Engine, as you say, like in Japan, and that's like a masterpiece. So this is basically like the final boss, but made a lot easier, obviously. And it's a really nice touch because it kind of puts you in the mood of the game and it kind of sets a feeling with that really interesting conversation between you and Dracula. It just shows you how like cheesy and camp the game's going to be.
Another thing that Castlevania or Symphony of the Night set, that kind of became a staple of even Metroid games to follow, was you roll in completely OP and then you lose all your shit. As kind of a taste for what you're going to become.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the thing is, it gives you a taste of what you can become and more. Because it's like, you can become this powerful, but believe me, with some of the upgrades, you can be even more OP.
Yeah, and I think that ties in really well with the RPG mechanics that they put in the game, like with the level ups and the different weapon abilities. Some weapons might have higher attack, but they're slower, and other weapons, say like the fist weapons, really powerful, but you've got to be like really close. There is like a huge amount of variety in how you can play the game.
Well, I find it quite rewarding, the system, because you upgrade quite frequently as well, both in terms of leveling up and getting, upgrading your stats, but the loot you find and the items you find, you get at such regular intervals that you feel like you're constantly progressing. I mean, even later in the game, in the second half of the game, you're finding like these really overpowered weapons, and you're just thinking, right, do I choose to have this really fast ultra sword or this magic staff that can do ridiculous attacks?
I had really bad luck with that, and it was about 3 hours into the game before I saw a sword that wasn't red rust.
Well, the thing is, I knew the location of these, I don't know whether they're brass knuckles or whatever.
Jewel knuckles.
Yeah, the jewel knuckles. Because you can get that early as long as you can get past the knight, and you can kind of damage boost past him. But if you pick it up, you're so powerful for like the early part of the game, and it makes up for the fact that most of the early weapons are kind of shit.
I used the jewel knuckles for like the next 2-3 hours of the game after I got them.
Yeah, you find that you pick up weapons and you're like, okay, my jewel knuckles are better, I'll just keep this.
Yeah.
I did like that, because we're talking about you can have all these different builds. I liked how there was a lot of weapons and gear that coincided with each other, like you got the shield rod, and then you could equip different shields to get different boosts.
Yeah, definitely. And some of the shield attacks are really good.
Really powerful, or just some of the buffs you get from them are crazy.
Yeah, I like the skull shield one. I don't know if you use that one.
I didn't find that.
Well, when you get the skull shield, which is from, the gigantic skulls?
Yeah.
The big flowing skull things. Well, that drops the skull shield, and if you use that with the shield rod, it makes this big skull appear and it fires like a laser beam from its mouth. It's really fun to use on bosses.
I actually had no idea that the shield rod did different things with each shield.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, like, a lot of the weapons have all these hidden attacks. Like, with the shield rod, you use that in your secondary weapon at the same time, and you'll do a special attack. But some of them you use, like the Hadouken move, the quarter circle, and it'll produce, like, another magic attack. It's got loads of hidden moves.
I think it speaks a lot to the depth of the game that I went through the entire thing, and there's still stuff that I'm learning even now about it.
Yeah, I mean, you could get through the entire game without realizing that Alucard can do these magic spells and do all these crazy demonic magic attacks.
Yeah.
There's my friend he loves this game. He was sitting there as I was playing it, and he was talking about, because again, I was finding all this stuff that goes so deeper than what's on the surface. And I guess there's a sword in there that gets more like it's weak as hell when you start, but as you kill enemies that bleed, it becomes more and more powerful.
Yes, the Muramasa.
Until it starts getting like hellishly powerful.
Yeah. I think it could theoretically be one of the most powerful weapons in the game, but you have to spend like countless hours trying to level it up and stuff.
But it's thought like that goes into a game like this, that you, even if you didn't know that, this game would still be excellent. And then when you start to see these different things and how deep it goes and how much thought was put into all of these little things that aren't even necessary to play in the game, is what rockets this through just a true masterpiece.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I quite like the familiars as well, which do different things. Like, for me, the sword familiar is really cool.
Yeah, the sword is what I used for the most of the game.
Yeah. Well, I used it pretty much from the moment I found it, and by the end of the game, it was more powerful than I was. Like, it dealt most damage to Dracula.
I found the sword one quite late, so I didn't have as much time to level it before Dracula, but it was still doing a decent amount of damage.
Yeah.
I somehow managed to not find it at all.
Well, that's the thing. The game's so big that you can go through the game and not find most of the stuff. There's so many items and so many weapons and so much stuff to it.
And to be honest, if you didn't know that there was an inverted castle, then most players would kind of like defeat Belmont, and then they'd be like, oh, that's
the end.
That's the end of the game, when that's only like halfway through.
Honestly, I kind of feel bad for people that got to that point and thought that was the real ending, because first of all, it's a very unsatisfying ending, but then you're missing out on so much more.
Oh yeah, definitely. But I mean, it's kind of cool because when you figure it out, it feels like you've found out something amazing because you've unlocked this whole new game effectively.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about it is the fact that they, when designing the game, had to make sure that every room could be traversed both normally and upside down.
I was just about to say that.
To an extent. I mean, there's some rooms which work really well upside down, and there's some rooms like, you know, the tower bit which links to the library and everything?
Yeah.
That room is such a pain in the ass because your double jump doesn't quite reach the ledges, so you have to turn into a bat or do your floating boot thing, your anti-gravity boots, in order to traverse it. And I kind of think that with a bit of extra planning, that room could have been a bit less stressful. And there's a few other places like that where it feels like the design isn't as good. But then there are other parts of the castle where you think they've planned this out really well.
From what I understand, it was actually fairly late in development that they actually decided to put in the inverted castle. So that may be the reason for some of that.
Yeah, definitely. One of the criticisms I do have about the game, and I'm not sure if you'll agree, is the difficulty curve is kind of all over the place. Like, when the game starts out, it starts out pretty hard, and then you just get stronger and stronger. And there are a few places where there's a difficulty spike, like in the inverted caverns, but mostly it just seems to get easier as the game progresses because you're getting stronger.
Right.
And that's a staple of the Metroidvania games, where it's not, the game doesn't get harder.
You get stronger.
You get stronger. The point is that it starts out relatively difficult, and by the end, the only thing that should be giving you trouble is bosses.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels fulfilling in a way, but it also makes the initial part of the game more frustrating than like the later half.
Although once you get to the clock tower, then your power level doesn't really matter. It's just
as you're hitting machines heads and falling down to the bottom.
I hated that particular section. I mean, I love the rest of the game, but I hated the clock tower.
I traversed that section easily. But where I did have problems is, you know, when you're unlocking the secret room in that area and you have to turn those cogs? That was so frustrating because I just kept turning into stone. And the more annoyed I got, the more it happened.
I knew that the secret room was there, but after getting turned to stone so many times, after dying so many times, I just thought, forget it. You know, it can stay a secret.
And there's fuck all in there as well.
You get like a magic boost.
Yeah, it's so much shit, and you just think, after all that...
You thought something good was in here, but it was me, Dio.
But one thing I can't criticise is the music. The music system.
Oh, absolutely.
Fantastic. I almost wonder in a couple areas if they recorded with a actually did like a proper orchestral recording, and then it just got compressed down.
It's possible.
It sounds synthetic to me.
A lot of it does sound synthetic, but there's one section where you're sitting there going, that sounds really good for, PlayStation 1.
Yeah, I mean, I think the game, from an audio perspective, is really good throughout. I mean, the music's good, and all the sound effects, and even the voice acting. People slate the voice acting in the English version, but I think it fits. The game is like, campy as hell, and the voices and the dialogue kind of fit it. To be honest, I can't really criticize it too much.
It's too dramatic for its own good.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of supposed to be over the top dramatic. Like the ending dialogue with Dracula's, where he's saying that the one thing that you forgot was love or whatever, and love beat you in the end.
It was, you were doomed the moment you forgot to love.
Yeah, and it's so fucking stupid. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it really fits the tone of the game as a whole, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
In terms of the music, every single track is really, really memorable and iconic. My personal favorite was in the catacombs, I think it was, where you first see the Salem witches. And there's this weird creaking sound in the soundtrack, which I found really unsettling, and it just really added to the atmosphere. It's just like this in the soundtrack, and it just works really, really well. That is probably my favorite music in the entire game, even though it's quite minimalist. It just works for that area.
A lot of good games, we're going to cover it eventually, but like Metroid Fusion does that too, where there's a lot of sections where the music almost is just ambient noise, but it sets the tone better than like a full track could.
Well, I mean, that was something we saw last year with Zelda Breath of the Wild, where there was barely any music, but the little sounds that were in there kind of built up that post-apocalyptic atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't really agree with that, to be honest, but I think that's a topic for another day.
I think my favorite track was in the Colosseum, but only because it felt a little out of place. It felt a little too upbeat.
Yeah, but it's good though. It's good.
But
music.
it's good. It just I liked it because it was funny to me. On top of being a quality piece of music, it was just a little odd.
The only piece of music that I didn't really like in the game was the ending theme.
You see, I like it just because it's odd. It doesn't match any of the other music, and I kind of love it for that because it just comes out of nowhere.
When it first kicked in, I thought, oh my god, it's Celine Dion. It turned out not to be, but it sounds like a Celine Dion song.
It was a little weird.
Yeah, it is odd, but never mind. So one of the things I thought was a particular standout in the game as well is, well, the enemy and the boss design. I mean, some of the bosses basically just feel like big enemies with big health bars. But I think the design of, all the enemy creatures in the game is pretty good.
Yeah. I very much enjoyed, like, the giant knights. They just looked really badass.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them died like little bitches, but they looked really cool.
Well, the first, enemy you see in the game as Alucard are these big fucking werewolves. And then you kill them in one hit with, your sword. And it's pretty awesome because they're howling as you enter this dark corridor. And yeah, it's pretty cool. But then later you've got things like the Medusa heads, which are a neat concept. And then you've got obviously the bosses, which I quite like the succubus boss, which is interesting design because she pretends to be your mother.
Yeah.
But for me, I think my favourite bosses were maybe Galgamoth, which is the big dude in the inverted castle, which I set my challenge for, who fires lightning and everything, and Legion, which is the guy that's made up of human corpses.
Oh yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah,
that was
just
a
a ball of
boss
corpses.
fight.
Yeah, it lagged as hell during that point, but it was good.
There was an odd boss I found that my roommate said was supposed to be kind of a bonus boss, and he's essentially a giant green lizard man, and he was a bitch and a half. And I don't know what his name was. All I know is that I think he was just kind of pocketed down in the corner, and I think I got a weapon from him, and that was it.
Giant green lizard man. Whereabouts was it? The inverted castle?
No, it was in the primary castle.
Mm,
Can't remember what he was called, but
Oh no, it can't be Beelzebub because he's in the inverted, the big guy that's hanging from the ceiling with all the flies.
he when he starts up, he like throws bats all over the room. Then you beat him up a little bit, and then he morphs into this giant ass green lizardy looking dude.
Oh, that rings a bell. Yeah. I can't remember his name either, but that does ring a bell because he starts out a lot smaller, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have absolutely no idea who you're talking about.
The boss is Ulrox.
Oh, he's not hidden boss.
Well, he's completely unnecessary.
Yeah, I suppose he is. Yeah, I know you mean though.
He's kind of just pocketed down in the corner of the castle with nothing.
Yeah, alright. I didn't know you meant all rocks.
I might have gotten to him a little too soon, and that's why he was so hard, but he was just beating the shit out of me.
Yeah, he is a cool boss.
I did enjoy it, but it was probably the hardest boss in the game that I came across so far. I haven't gotten really deep into the inverted castle.
Well, for me, it was Galgamoth that was the hardest, but as you guys figured out, there's a special, accessory you can wear to make you immune to lightning.
Yeah.
I did it without that accessory, which made it a lot harder, but he's still pretty cool. I know that the Saturn version has an extra boss in there as well, which is kind of cool. Oh, that's one thing as well. What versions did you guys play? I mean, I played the Saturn version, of course.
I
Did
played
anyone play on
the
the
XBLA.
PlayStation?
Yeah, mine was XBLA.
Mine was the one on PSN, which is the PlayStation 1 version.
Alright, so pretty much you all played the HD remake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you were all quite lucky because I think that game runs at maybe 60 frames per second, whereas the console originals were a bit kind of up and down. Particularly with Legion, it just slows down quite a lot with all the corpses moving about.
Well, yeah, and especially I played it on my Xbox One, so it never lagged at all for me.
But one thing that version actually misses out on is that the Sega Saturn version had a bunch of extras. There's a couple of exclusive areas. There's a prison which is, kind of uneventful, but it looks nice and the music's cool. But then there's this weird garden thing, and there are these trees with really derpy faces. There's guys with hedge trimmers and stuff, and then there's quite a cool boss as well. It's pretty cool.
But yeah, one of the things about the Saturn version, and it's kind of a bummer that it was only released in Japan, but there's a whole nother mode where you can play through as Maria.
Yes, and that is pretty good.
Yeah, and then that one thing was actually put into the PSP version. None of the exclusive areas were in there, but
Maria was.
But Maria was put in.
Before we move on to how Maria differs, did anyone actually play as Richter?
I did a little bit.
I didn't.
I've played as Rick. You can do the same thing I didn't play it in this. In Harmony of Dissonance, you can do the same thing where you start a game file and name it Richter, and you get to play through as Richter instead. And if it's anything like this, Richter is a glass cannon.
I wouldn't say he's a bit of a glass cannon because he dies a lot sooner than Alucard, but he's really overpowered. He does these stupid slides, and he can do slide kicks into people and just kill them instantly.
When you do your magic, you have the crucifix, and it's insanely powerful.
Yeah, or even better, if you've got the holy water, you do, I can't remember what it's called, Hydrostorm or something, I think.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, and it's basically rain made of holy water, and it just annihilates everything.
Yeah,
in the beginning of the game, and there's actually an achievement for it too.
Yeah, you can do it. Yeah, you can kill Dracula with it.
Yeah, you can kill Dracula in 2 hits if you time the holy water right.
Yeah. And he's also got access to a super uppercut as well. So he does an uppercut, but you can do it again in midair, so you can basically fly. If you've ever seen that Sonic Sonic Boom glitch where Knuckles continually jumps. It's
Yeah.
basically like that, apart from intentional.
I'll have to give this a shot through as Richter because it does sound like a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, he's really awesome. I mean, Maria is kind of similar. She's got like a really awesome jump, which is sort of similar to Richter's uppercut. But she also has like these, awesome spells. Like there's one where she fires like this massive fire blast, which is pretty awesome. And yeah, it's really good. She's got all these unique magic spells that just annihilate everything. She's really fun to play as. So shame it wasn't released in the HD one.
Yeah, I remember reading that she was a lot more magic focused.
Yeah.
We've talked in the past about how shitty Konami's HD remixes tend to be, so them leaving out a shitload of content is kind of par for the course.
Thing is, this is actually quite a good HD remix. I've played it on XBLA before, and it is really good. It's just weird that they've missed out the extra stuff. I mean, I suppose it's like Konami and Mega Man 8, where they always miss out the Saturn version stuff, even though like it had extra stuff, which is, vastly superior.
Mega Man's Capcom.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what I meant. So like Capcom do the same with that game, and Konami do it with Castlevania, so...
It's a bit of an odd choice.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know why they do it, but there must be a reason.
It might have been like how Sony gets a lot of exclusive content for the PlayStation versions of games, like Assassin's Creed had a bunch of it. It might have been a deal they made with Sega where that content was exclusive to that, and they can't put it in.
Well, I think the reason with this, the Saturn version of Symphony of Night could be to do with how that version was made. I don't know if you realise, but the game isn't actually 2D. It's 3D, but they map like 2D sprites on top to make it look 2D.
Right.
So the PlayStation couldn't handle 2D sprites, so they basically made a 2D game from 3D polygons and kind of made this fake 2D, which obviously meant that when they transferred it to the Saturn, the performance took a dip because that kind of works in reverse. And I have a feeling that maybe they made 2D sprites for the new areas, and so if they included it in the HD one, they'd have to do a bit more work because it doesn't fit. I don't know. There must be a reason for it.
That sounds like a really strange workaround, and I know for Doom it was kind of the opposite. Despite how Doom looks, it's not really 3D. It's a 2D top-down shooter, technically, that kind of like looks 3D because of how it's presented, but technically underneath the hood it's a top-down 2D shooter.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting when games do that. I mean, obviously you had that kind of thing with stuff like, Outrun and those kind of racing games that faked 3D. But, stuff like Doom does it really well, and like this does it in reverse, and it's quite an interesting thing for them to do as a workaround.
It's kind of brilliant, honestly.
By the time they got to Quake, they had like a full 3D engine, but Doom used 2D one.
Wolfenstein was the same thing. Actually, Wolfenstein is it's called Scan something, that whole system. But yeah, completely revolutionized the FPS with that.
Right, so before we finish up on this game, what was your final build for, the inverted castle for, you two that got to the end? Or, the regular castle if you only got that far? How did you finish up? What weapons were you using? What outfits? And how were you generally stacked up?
My build, I think my sword was called Mormgrim. Something like that. I was using the Alucard shield, a couple little trinkets. I think one was called Eye of Zul, and there was another one called something else. I think I was using either Alucard mail or diamond plate. It's about a month since I played it, so I'm not 100% sure. But I was pretty powerful at the end, and I was using the sword familiar as well.
Yeah, I used the sword familiar all the way. For my weapon, I was switching between the Chrysogam and the one you get from the sword familiar when it hits level 50. I was using the Alucard shield. I was actually using the walk armor by the end of the game because it gets super powerful at that point. And then my accessories, one was the one that the cave trolls drop, that's like a plus 15 defense, and then the other one was the gauntlet.
By the time I beat Richter, I want to say I was using the walk armor as well. I'm not sure which baubles I had on my hands, but I was using that's not the color, is it the color cape? The one that you can totally customize?
Yeah.
Buy from the librarian? I want to say I was using the... Chris Grimm sounds really familiar. It might not have been it. It was like a two-handed greatsword. It was kind of slow, but it also just murdered the shit out of everything.
It wasn't the Chrysogrim. Chrysogrim's like the opposite. You get an invade castle and it's super fast and super powerful, so you pretty much just walk through enemies.
There's another. Maybe I'm thinking of the sword. There's a big two-handed greatsword you get that has an odd name like that, but it's really, really slow.
Yeah.
And you can't angle it or anything. It's just massive and slow. And I dropped that one and went back to the two-handed greatsword because it was a little bit faster, a little bit more manageable.
For me, I kind of went towards the Sword Familiar. I had an item that boosted magic attacks, so made him even more powerful. I had something that boosted my own attack, and I think I might have just been using something like the Alucard sword in the end. And the Sword Familiar was doing like twice as much damage as I was, and yeah, he pretty much just murdered Dracula, and I helped. But I think it was like level 99 by the end because I got 100% completion and, searched all the map before I fought Dracula. So it just become overpowered by the time I got to Dracula.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Right, so everyone enjoyed it then, I take it?
Loved it.
Yeah, by far one of the best games that I've come across from this podcast.
Yeah, for me, definitely. Within 2 hours, it had jumped into my top 5 games of all time.
I was about to say, by far one of the best games that I've played, because I'd never, I played a little bit before, but I'd never really gotten into it. This is just one of the best games I've played. It's that good.
It is good. I mean, the good thing as well is because it did get the release on PSN and XBLA, you can pick it up for pretty cheap.
It's on PSN for $7.99, I believe.
What a bargain.
Or you could pay like £100 and get it on PlayStation or Saturn.
Yeah.
Up to you. Right, so we'll take a break and then we'll rejoin with Matt's pick.
My pick this month is Sonic the Hedgehog for the Master System. This game was released back in 1991, the same year as the original Sonic the Hedgehog, though it was made by a different team. The game came out on the Master System and the Game Gear, and while it shares some similarities with the Mega Drive version, it's kind of pared down a bit. It's focused more on exploration rather than speed, and generally it's a lot slower than the Mega Drive version. The soundtrack was made by a different person as well, and the music is really decent in this one, just as it was in the original. And this is a game that I had very early on the Master System. I believe the first 2 games I got for the Master System was Alex Kidd in Miracle World, which was built in, and this on cartridge. So I spent a lot of time on this. What did you guys think about it?
Well, it's funny how you mentioned that you had it growing up on the Master System. I also had it growing up, but I had the Game Gear version, which is more or less the same, but with a few slight tweaks.
I believe it's a little bit more zoomed in.
Yeah, it's a little bit more zoomed in, but it also changes some of the levels as well. The most notable thing for me is probably the second boss, where in the Master System there's like a gap between the platforms, but on the Game Gear version there's actually like mini bridges, so you can't actually fall into the pit where Robotnik is. So if you get the last hit on him and you don't move, you're not going to die. And also on the first boss, where he's flying above the top, you can actually hit him while he's moving backwards and forwards. But yeah, I also am, very familiar with this game, and I like it a lot.
I wasn't able to get terribly far into this game because my emulator was really chuggy. I thought it was just kind of how the game was at first, but I watched some gameplay, and it's much smoother than I was playing. I tried a couple different emulators and a couple different ROMs, and I was still getting a lot of chug, so maybe it's just my computer box. But overall, what I was getting from it was that I kind of like it better than the Genesis version. Visually, music, all of that.
Me too.
The chug is actually in the original game. It's probably not down to your emulator.
Oh, it was, this was really bad chug. Like, I couldn't get much farther than the second level because it was getting so bad.
That'll be your emulator then.
Yeah.
It doesn't get really bad until the water level.
And even then, the water level, you could say it's down to water physics.
I was not a fan of this. I think partially because I don't get on well with platformers to begin with, and the fact that I played a little bit of the original Sonic, or at least I played a decent amount of the original Sonic, and I played the Genesis version, so this one was kind of jarring for me. And when it got to the point where I lost 7 lives in a span of 2 minutes, I was kind of done.
Sonic is a bit of an acquired taste.
But this game in particular, I think I may have kind of had my nostalgia goggles on when I was first playing this. And coming back to it now, it's not the best. I mean, it's a fun platformer. It's really, really short. But I feel that they kind of tried to lengthen the game a little bit by putting in a lot of cheap deaths. If you attempt at any point to go fast, you will fall into some spikes, you'll fall off the edge of a screen, you'll slam into spring that will catapult you to certain death. The game just does not want you to go fast, which is kind of how Sonic was marketed.
But then they add in bits like in the first level where there's that ramp you can use where if you get enough speed built up, you get a nice jump out of it.
And you skip the entire level.
I did that.
But yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. It does include some cheap deaths, but despite those, I still enjoy the game like a hell of a lot. I mean, one thing that sets it apart for me is the actual choice of acts, because it takes some of the themes from the Genesis version, the Mega Drive version, and then has some of its own. So you've got like Bridge and Jungle and Skybase, which are completely new levels, but then you've got things like Green Hill and Labyrinth and Scrap Brain, which are based off the old game, or the original. And I kind of like how it's similar enough to be considered a port, but also does its own thing where you can actually own both versions and enjoy both versions.
Yeah, definitely. They are different enough, and they are both still fun despite the frustrating elements. But fuck the jungle level, though.
You see, I love the jungle level, but it does have some bullshit springs that, propel you backwards, and I hate the boss. For me, The boss is the worst thing about jungle, because I just die so often, because it's so easy to die on the smoke of the bomb. And one thing that I found, it didn't happen to me this time, but as a child, I would beat the boss, and then I'd struggle to jump off the vine and fall like in the pit between the vine and the final platform.
Yeah, because you've got to be right on the edge of that vine to make the jump. If you jump before the edge, it'll instead jump you upwards.
Yeah.
When you think you're jumping right.
Yeah, so you don't get all the horizontal momentum you need in order to cross the gap. It's quite annoying.
Most of my playthroughs as a kid ended at the jungle boss.
Yeah, me too. I was just going to say that as a child, there would basically be 2 finish points for me. Either I'd lose all my lives and continues at the jungle boss, and it'd be game over, or I'd beat the jungle boss and I'd beat the rest of the game. For me, that's like the one difficulty spike. The rest of the game I find pretty straightforward and quite simple once you know where all the, the cheap deaths are. but the jungle boss is just something else.
For the most part, for the rest of the game, I do believe the last boss is a bit of an arsehole because he follows a set pattern for about half of his health, and then he randomizes it for the last half, which can get annoying.
I don't think it's necessarily random. What happens is the laser works from a different side. Instead of going from right to left, it follows you to where you are, then starts, and then stops just before his chamber. So you have to get close to his chamber. But then obviously you've got to avoid the little spark as well. It's not too bad, but it is kind of a bit annoying. I find that if during that final part, if you just get one hit on him and play it safe, it's not too difficult.
Yeah, that's what I ended up doing.
But yeah, what was your favourite level? For me, Skybase is like the best level from it because it just looks beautiful, the music's beautiful, and I really like the levels. I really like the stages. So you've got the first one where you're on the ground and you've got to infiltrate this airship, and there's all these laser beams and platforms. And then on the second, you're actually on the airship, and you can either do the level as intended, or you can just go like under the airship and skip the entire thing. It's a really fun zone.
Honestly, I think the first couple levels are probably my favourite just because it's really colourful and
Yeah.
it's probably the closest visually to the Mega Drive version.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Although my favourite music is the jungle level.
Yeah, the jungle music's good. Did you recognise the music from the bridge level by any chance?
I'm not sure I remember which one the bridge music is.
Right, okay, well go back and listen to it and see if you recognise it, because they actually reused the theme again. They reused it in the Sonic Adventure games and possibly after as well. The theme for Tails is actually that theme, but with lyrics.
Huh.
I've never played Sonic Adventure.
Well, the first one's okay, but the second one is pretty much garbage.
Hey, you take that back.
No, I will not take it back.
It's only kind of garbage.
Yeah. So, Ryan and Steve, what did you think about the actual, the difficulty of it? I mean, did you find it too difficult compared to the other Sonics, like the Mega Drive ones?
Absolutely. I mean, and like I've said, I don't deal well with platformers to begin with because I don't feel like I should have to memorize a game to be able to play it well. But yeah, I was not a fan of the difficulty.
I think one of the things that sets it back is the rings as well, because unlike Sonic, you can't collect your rings. Once you lose them, they're gone.
I felt the game, the controls were somehow even mushier than the Genesis version. And like I said, Sonic is pitched as a high-speed platformer, but this is a really slow pace for the most part. It's a very slow, calculated platformer. And when you add really mushy controls to some touchy platforming, it kind of makes for a bad time.
Yeah, I mean, I would say about the speed, it's sort of similar with the Mega Drive version. The original Sonic is very slow-paced compared to Sonic 2 and after.
And in Sonic 2 and after, it picks up the speed, and it feels a little more forgiving because you're not trying to do lots of tedious jumping. You're mostly just trying to get through the level.
Yeah.
In terms of difficulty, though, I actually found the Genesis Sonic to be really hard. It gets hard fast. The Master System one I find easy for the most part.
Yeah. I think it's easy, but with some kind of difficult spots.
Yeah.
And yeah, one thing that I like about the Master System version is how they do the emeralds in this. Because the emeralds are actually hidden in the levels, so you have to explore and find them, rather than do these stupid bullshit special stages, which, I mean, I'm not going to lie, the special stages in almost every Sonic game are shit. Undeniably shit. And I find them frustrating. So having them in the level to find and search for is a lot better for me. What do you guys think?
I did like that you could find it in the level. That was a nice touch from my perspective.
I didn't get the bonus level for this game, but I rather enjoyed the bonus level for Sonic 2.
I really like the Sonic 2 Mega Drive bonus levels. I'm not a huge fan of the Sonic 1 bonus level. That one where you're in that thing that constantly rotates around and...
No, that was bullshit.
Yeah.
But the
music.
But the Sonic 2 one where you're running down that tube, I really like that.
Well, the Sonic 2 one is fun, but my problem is that about like 5 emeralds in, it starts getting really hard. And like so bullshit hard that you have to know exactly where all the rings and all the spikes are. And that kind of ruins it for me.
Yeah, memorization is not often fun.
Speaking of the emeralds, did any of you collect the emerald on the Labyrinth Zone?
No, I didn't even get there.
Did you find where it was?
Not this time. I have completed it as a kid with all the emeralds, but it's not something that I went after this time.
Yeah. Well, on the emerald level, it's not even hidden. There's a line of spikes, and the emerald is within the spikes. So you have to either get invincibility, which I'm not entirely sure whereabouts it is, or you have to damage boost, collect it, and quickly jump off. Out of all the emeralds, this is the only one that's in a kind of a bullshit place. But yeah, it's just hidden within spikes.
That's not very fair.
Not really. But yeah, I do like the game. Even Labyrinth Zone, which, I like in the original one as well, I find quite fun. And I definitely think the Labyrinth Zone boss is a lot better than the one in the Genesis version, because I'm not fond of that fight.
You have to time your hits really well, though, on the boss of that level, because if you try and hit him when he's at the bottom, if he's on his way down, you'll just fall through the gap. You've kind of got to wait until he comes from above.
Oh yeah, I always hit him when he comes from above. But I find him pretty cool, and you can generally time your hits kind of well because the walls have tiles. So as soon as you find out when you can hit him from, you can get in 2 hits every time and beat him relatively fast. But I find it's fun fight. Although, for that section, you have unlimited air, and the other levels you don't, so it's kind of a bit inconsistent.
I didn't get that far, but I've always hated any water level in Sonic has always just pick a game, it's garbage to me.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I can understand with like a lot of them. So how far did you guys get? I assume you completed it again, Matt.
Yeah.
I got to Bridge.
Did you beat Bridge, or did you just get to Bridge?
I got about 30 seconds into Bridge, and like I said, lost 7 lives in the span of a minute and a half, and I was done.
Damn. What about you, Ryan?
I beat the first zone boss, and I was just having too much chuggy trouble.
Oh, okay, because the emulator issues.
Yeah.
Well, that's a shame, because some of the later levels are actually pretty good. As I say, Jungle is a particular highlight for me because it looks and sounds great, but yeah, I really dig it. The interesting thing as well is that this one is probably the most similar to the Mega Drive one, and it was by, I think the developer's Ancient?
It is,
Am I right in that?
Yeah.
Yeah. But then the other Sonic games on the Master System were actually developed by a different company. I forget the name, but those ones are like not even close to the Mega Drive ones. So it's kind of cool that they, went to a different developer and just started doing their own thing on the Master System. And I really appreciate that.
Although it might have been better if they just stuck with Ancient and kind of went with that kind of style.
Yeah, I get that. Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose the original Sonic is still different enough. I just like how there's effectively, I think there are 4 8-bit Master System Sonics and 4 16-bit. So you effectively got 8, maybe 9 if you include CD. Great Sonic games on the retro systems.
Interesting reading here. Apparently the Master System, or rather the 8-bit Sonic the Hedgehog, was developed to promote the Game Gear.
I can imagine that.
I think it was the original pack-in game for the Game Gear. It was either that or Columns.
I think it could have been Sonic because I didn't have columns on my Game Gear. I only had on the Mega Drive. On my Game Gear had Sonic. So it could have been the packing game for Game Gear. It's interesting because you say they use it to promote the Game Gear, but then like with almost all Game Gear games, they're just released on the Master System anyway, so...
Yeah.
Never mind.
That's probably because the Game Gear wasn't doing too hot.
Yeah, true.
What a
But I
shame.
kind of feel like they did a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. They thought it wasn't doing hot, so they released it on the Master System. But then doing that meant that it would never succeed.
Yeah.
But hey ho, I still enjoyed the Game Gear.
I mean, I think the Game Gear was a good idea. It's just the battery issue was a major problem.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to use as a portable on the go. I think if you're on holiday and you've got a place to plug it in, or you're at a friend's house or something like that, then it's fine. But if you're doing it like in the car or something or on a train, there's just not enough battery time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to get about 2 hours maximum out of 6 AA's.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you're playing a game like Tales Adventure, which is like a sprawling epic game, you kind of need time to dig into it.
But yeah, it is still a fun game despite the flaws. If you're kind of familiar with the game, you can complete it in around 40 minutes. I believe I completed it in this time. It is like a really quick
fix.
A quick experience. And it's fairly cheap as well. You can get it for like £5 on eBay.
Oh yeah, and that's if you want it in mint condition and sparkling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I like it a lot. To be honest, I think I prefer Sonic 2 on the Master System a bit more, but I still think the first one is a pretty solid game. Right, has anyone else got anything to add about that?
No. I wasn't able to get far enough in it to put in a good opinion, but I think you two covered it.
Yeah, it's a shame you two weren't able to get a little bit further, but never mind. Okay, so we'll take a little bit break and then we'll move on to our final pick from Stephen.
Now we come to what's quickly becoming a regular installment on the show, which is Steven pisses off the other co-hosts. My pick for this was Mega Man X4. And you might be saying, that's not really much of a platformer. Well, that's because I hate platformers. It's really a platformer in that it's Mega Man, but it's much more of an action, brawler type. Pretty simple, released in 1997 for the Saturn and the PlayStation. It's been re-released on PS2 in the X Collection, and just recently in the Mega Man X Legacy Collection for PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. And this, honestly, growing up, I liked Mega Man, but I hadn't played the original games. This was actually the first Mega Man game I actually owned. I had played Mega Man X, but I didn't own one until this game. A big part of why I enjoyed this is I really, really like the character Zero, and the fact that you can play as him for the whole game without any qualifications. I really liked that, and I like the way he plays, to the point where it took me a long time to actually get decent with X in this game, and he's supposed to be the easy mode.
I actually feel that, because I tried playing through as X, and I was just having a horrible time, and playing through as Zero, whereas the bosses are a little bit more difficult, it seems, half the time, because you don't have super weaknesses against them. The levels are designed around Zero, and I've played through the Mega Man Zero series several times. I'm playing Mega Man Zero 2 this day and all week long, and I love the way Zero plays, and he plays similar in that series as he does to this. So I totally get that.
You see, I find the opposite. I think that playing as X is actually easier. I see what you mean about the levels being easier with Zero, but only after you've got a few upgrades. Once you've got the air dash, for example, it then becomes, significantly easier. But to be honest, I find the whole game, the bosses and the levels, to be easier as X.
Zero getting a straight-up double jump made a lot of the game easier to navigate, especially considering that's, the second place you go to is the one that gives you the double jump. So you spend most of the game with it, and that there's a few times where you need to use X's ability that lets him get a quote unquote double jump, and the whole time you're doing that, you're just thinking this would be so much easier with Zero because I can just press the button again. But yeah, I mean, I did find the bosses are more difficult with Zero because, as Ryan said, we don't have a lot of the super weaknesses, especially for like Magma Dragoon and Slash Beast. But I actually found them to be more enjoyable fights with Zero because it was more like a test and not just let me pick the right weapon.
Yeah, I mean, do some of them even have weaknesses? There are some that I noticed a weakness for, like with Split Mushroom, but there are others where it didn't feel like I was really doing much more damage than my Zero Saber.
That was one thing I was having an issue with, is it felt like a lot of the weapons didn't, like they weren't the clear-cut weaknesses that you would experience in X1 through 3, where it's like, okay, yeah, they're going to go into a hard stun mode, they're going to take a lot of damage, like with, well, at first I found out with the spider, web spider, that you hit him, it's like, okay, so the attack makes him easier to hit because it shoots at an angle. Well, it turns out apparently you can hit his web that he's suspended from, and he'll drop and hit the ground. But you have to spam at him hard.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, because it's not obvious.
Yeah. But like there's a few bosses where there was a clear weakness, like with the Walrus guy, Mushroom, as I say, and then I think Spider as well. I think Fire was his weakness, was it? But the others, not so much.
The Fire does a pretty decent amount to Cyber Peacock. It's also, like, what I liked is how when you get to the end of the game, the final fight actually uses a lot of Zero's abilities. Like,
yeah, that's true.
It's one of the few uses of the dash attack that I've found in the game.
Yeah.
I also find it interesting that with Zero, the only way you can hurt his odd Grim Reaper's form, I had no idea what was going on there, is with his Hadouken, not his Hadouken, his Shoryuken uppercut.
Yeah, that's cool.
The actual final boss, I couldn't actually work out how to do any damage to it whatsoever. I just kept getting hit by those different coloured blocks that it was throwing from different sides.
Well,
because you can only damage like certain forms.
Yeah,
so,
it's
like, the weird thing.
The one with the gun you can hit, and and the one that's kind of like a head on the ground you can hit.
Yeah.
And it's basically just a, if he does the right attack, you can get in and hit him. But it takes a lot of doing, and you have to avoid all the attacks from the colored heads. It's definitely a test. I mean, even as X, that final boss is, challenging.
It is a cool fight, and I think it is one of my favourite Sigma fights from the first 4 games. But yeah, it's quite challenging.
It was a bit of a cluster.
One thing that I liked about Zero was that you could get all the move upgrades. But what I didn't like is that you don't actually end up getting that many weapons. So you've got like the uppercut, you've got the peacock thing, you've got the electric whip, which is like really slow. And then you've got like the ice thing, which is more or less useless. So it kind of felt like even though he got the extra moves, he didn't get a variety of weapons.
I feel like the weapons were, for a first outing, I think they were handled well enough. I agree that the ice one, you really gotta get that one completely figured out to do a lot with it. I actually learned how to use the little extra decorative spikes on it to hit things.
Yeah.
But it was not expertly designed.
Is it possible to hit Jet Stingray with that ice?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I know that when he swoops underneath, you could potentially hit him.
No,
I could only hit him like in the second half when he actually goes down to the bottom of the water.
You can get behind him.
Or you just double jump up to him and do it, and if you're close enough to him, the little spike from the back of the ice will hit him and freeze him.
All right. I couldn't even get a hit on him with the ice thing, so I just hit him with a sword. Speaking of Jet Stingray, though, fuck that level.
Fuck that level. That was the most infuriating level I've played in a long, long time.
And this is where I've actually, I like that level I know pretty well just because I've had to do it so many times. So, yeah, I agree. It's not great the first time you go in.
Is that the one on the jet ski?
Yes.
Yeah.
I should point out that I play this on the Switch, and there's a new mode called Rookie Difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially toddler difficulty.
Rookie's a pretty conservative term.
Because I'm like really, really bad at Mega Man games, I played through the game on that, and the jet ski level was actually my favorite level. I think because on that difficulty, you don't really take damage from regular enemies unless there's a projectile. I believe you can get hit by projectiles, but contact damage with enemies isn't a thing, and you take half damage from bosses. So that jet ski level for me was actually quite fun on that difficulty. I didn't try it on the higher difficulty. I tried a few of the levels on the higher difficulty, but not that particular one. So I'm sure if I went back and tried it, I'd probably be throwing my controller out the window. But on the rookie difficulty, it is quite a fun level to play.
Well, when I first played it, I had to reset the bike bits quite a few times. But when I replayed it as Zero, I found that the level was a lot easier, but no more fun. And then the problem is you've got that jet ski bit, which, as I say, I don't really enjoy. And then you've got a boss which is kind of annoying because it's quite difficult to avoid all those little, sperm that he fires out.
Yeah,
I think they're supposed to be little stingrays, but, we'll call them that.
Yeah, and that's why the strategy for both characters is to freeze him before he can do that. Before he can do anything, really.
Yeah, definitely. But if you don't have the weapon, then you're going to be in for a terrible time.
Yeah.
My biggest qualm with that level was that it's supposed to feel kind of like a high speed, because, like Mega Man 8 has not a speeder bike, but it's the sled level, or the sledding section. And it's supposed to be kind of in that vein, but it feels completely different and worse.
Yeah. To give it some credit, I like the idea how the boss chases you in the second half, because it integrates the boss in the actual level.
That was a nice
really
touch.
appreciate. Yeah. But that's the only thing that I can really say was good about it. And I found in general, like, the levels were kind of hit and miss. Like, there's some levels that were good, but then you've got levels like Jet Stingray and, like Cyber Peacock as well, which I didn't enjoy on the second time round, and like Storm Owl as well, I find a bit annoying. There's a few stages that aren't so great.
Yeah, the race thing on Cyber Peacock is kind of annoying, especially if you're trying to collect the items.
Yeah, I enjoyed it the first time
grabbing
round.
the items.
Yeah, you got to get like an A rank, I think, or an S rank or something, and you get special items.
S rank. You have to get an S rank to get the item, A rank to proceed, and a B rank sends you back to the beginning.
Yeah. I liked the idea when I first played it, but when I replayed the game, it was just like, okay, because the actual platforming bits you've got to speed through aren't very interesting, and it's filled with like quite annoying obstacles.
Yeah.
And I found like the owl stage, the Storm Owl stage, I found the concept quite neat, how you fly, there's all these like flying airships that you're jumping across. But I found it more annoying rather than anything. Like, I didn't actually enjoy it because I just kept getting hit.
I felt the game suffered from a lot of half-baked level design, where, again, like you said, they had some ideas, but then they just executed it extremely lazily.
It's kind of a mix, because there's some levels like, the spider level in the jungle, I think is really good. But then you've got things like the mushroom level, where they try to be experimental, and for the most part, I really enjoy that level. But like the spiral staircase thing that goes round, I find it hell. Yeah, I find it very difficult to navigate. I appreciate what they were doing, and that they tried to do something a little bit different, but I don't think they really succeeded in the execution particularly well.
What I ended up doing on that level is just I killed the flying enemies and I just like ran through the rest. Even if the spike balls hit me, I just kept running and running and running. And it took like a fair bit of health off me, but probably less than it would have taken if I'd have stopped to kill every single enemy.
Yeah, that's all I do. I just run through it and just try and destroy what I can and just get to the end of it. Which isn't really the point, I imagine.
The one thing about X4 that pissed me off to no end was the timing. Doing a dash jump off a wall, the timing has changed ever so slightly on when you need to press the dash button and jump. You have to be holding to the wall ever so slightly for a little bit longer, press dash, and then jump, versus it being an almost instantaneous button press in the Zero series and Mega Man X1, 2, and 3.
I think that might be a version thing.
20, and it might have been, but like 20 years of muscle memory for that specific action is
difficult to
I'm
change.
noticing that happening, and I'm trying to dash over I climb up the wall, dash over a boss, and instead I just fall off because I pulled away from the wall too fast, according to the game.
Yeah, like I found that with Frost Walrus on my replay, because when I first played it, I played on the Saturn and didn't have like any problems. So I think that the wall jump is basically the same, but I think there's a certain amount of, maybe it's input delay or something, which makes the timing a bit off. But I assume it's the PlayStation version that the Switch uses for the emulation. But I found the Frost Walrus boss to be extremely hard because I couldn't wall jump over him. Instead, I think I did a dash jump in the end instead, just because it was a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so annoying because I'd try and wall jump and just fall off and fall into him. And I was getting so annoyed and just swearing at the screen. But when I played the game on Saturn, it didn't have whatever the problem is, and it was a whole lot easier. So yeah, I get what you mean, and I think that whether it's a version thing or an X4 thing, it's definitely annoying.
Yeah, and for me going through the first time, I didn't notice any of that because I hadn't played the others at that point.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Right, and if that's how the version was that you played, then that's just what you're going to be used to. Yeah. And effectively loosening the wall jump controls or the dash jump controls in the previous games, because it's not quite so specific, you're not going to notice that it's easier to do.
Right.
Or even really that much different.
Yeah.
But these were basically life and death jumps at times that were failing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit annoying.
Now, visually, the game is beautiful.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And the music, too.
Straight up. It's a fantastic looking game. The voice acting's a bit much.
Yeah, it's a little iffy.
But with the full animated cutscenes that they didn't apparently repeat for Mega Man 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of liked the introduction cutscenes from X3. And it's a bit of a shame they didn't include them in X4 and beyond, because those introductions were really neat.
I personally found the music to be a bit more forgettable than the previous Mega Man games that we've covered.
Yeah, I think that in general, the X music isn't as memorable as the classic series, but maybe that's just me.
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. And also I noticed in X4 it moved away from more of the rock and roll and over towards a much more electronica sound.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say the music in X4 is bad by any means, it's quite good, but it was definitely a little bit different.
So, were there any bosses that stuck out to you guys as, particularly enjoyable, or was it all just kind of blah for you guys?
I found Split Mushroom to be very annoying, but I didn't get to him as X. I beat him as Zero.
Okay.
And his little flipping all over the place thing got really old really fast.
Yeah, but if you use his weaknesses, like cake.
Well, see, but Zero doesn't have a weakness against him.
Yes, he does.
What is it?
It's a peacock thing, isn't it?
No, it's
the electric whip.
Yes, the one from the web spreader.
And that does basically the same thing, apart from you can only do it on the ground and not in the air, if I'm right.
Yeah. I filmed both characters doing that for the challenge, and I'll upload those to my channel, and you can watch those.
He was just a pain in the ass for me. I didn't realize that he actually had a proper weakness.
Yeah, he does. But the thing is, with Zero, the bosses have different weaknesses, so you just kind of have to play around and see if they have another.
I think I've found all of the bosses to be frustrating for me. I mean, as you know, I don't really like the series at all. This didn't endear me to it in any way. Even on the difficulty that I played it on, I found the bosses frustrating and difficult, and they needed multiple tries to do. It was a little bit easier with Zero, I found, because I think Ryan put it best a little while ago when he says it turns the game from a jump and run into a hack and slash, which is more my kind of speed. But in general, I didn't really enjoy any of the bosses. I just found them frustrating.
I think
I quite like the Magma Dragoon boss, though, because he does like all the Street Fighter moves.
I was going to say, I like Magma Dragoon the best, but also I was able to get to him with one of the right armors and just punch the shit out of him.
I love that you can do that.
Because I didn't know the first time around, and then when I played through as Zero, I noticed a breakable wall, which I could destroy.
Yeah.
And then I was fighting the boss in a mech armor, and I thought, this is pretty neat.
The Xbox version drops a achievement when you beat him with the mech, and it's he brought fists to a mech fight.
Yeah, I got that
nice.
as well.
But yeah, Magma Dragoon is one of my favorites. I'm particularly fond of him and the Colonel because even knowing what to do, there's still a tricky fight, and it's still challenging, and it's kind of fun because of the challenge. I mean, obviously with Magma Dragoon is, a cakewalk, but with Zero, they feel like a real fight, and it's very fun for me.
Yeah.
When the game was released, people talked about how, if you're a big Mega Man fan, you'll love this game. If not, you won't. So, I find that pretty much holds true.
And even now, 21 years later, opinions on Mega Man X4 are extremely polarized. You hate it or you love it.
Things I loved it when I first played it, and then when I played it through again as Zero, I enjoyed it a lot less. So I think I'm going to have to do another playthrough as X to see whether it's the game itself that I enjoyed less, or whether it's just playing as Zero that I enjoyed less.
Right. Well, if anyone wants to get their hands on this, the PlayStation version I'm seeing used from $3.19 on Amazon. New copies you can get for around $60, which, I mean, for a game this old is not that bad.
Yeah. For the Saturn version, I believe it was only released in America if you want Mega Man X4. But for the Japanese version, Rockman X4 is actually pretty cheap. I don't know how much it is individually, but I picked up all three of the Mega Man games for the Saturn for €100. So I would probably say like maybe about 30 quid possibly, maybe 40 quid.
Yeah, I'm seeing the minimum on Mega Man X4 for the Saturn is $81.98 on Amazon.
That's for the English version, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, the English version is very expensive. The Japanese version is pretty much in English for all you need, so just get a Japanese version. It's the same.
Right.
That, and to boot, you can get your hands on the Mega Man X collection for GameCube and PlayStation 4, and now there's the Mega Man. There's the new collections for 30 apiece.
Yeah, I mean the X collection, I'm seeing $6.30 used and $13 brand new. That's the PS2 and GameCube one.
And you can get up to 4 on the Legacy for 15 quid, I think.
Yeah.
£15 I paid on the Switch for the Mega Man X Legacy Collection 1, which has got X1 to 4.
Yeah, I mean, I can get both of them for $40, Collection 1 and 2.
Yeah.
One final thing as well that I want to mention about X4, which I thought was a change for the worse, is that in X1 to 3, you have like a special suit or ability or something like that you earn for getting all the collectibles.
Yeah, there's no
You have
hidden,
the
hidden
Hadouken, the
ability.
Shoryuken, and the gold armor in the first 3. And in this, you can get something by cheat code, which gets you it at the start of the game, more or less.
Yeah.
And that's about it. And I really think you should have earned I think it's a black suit or something you can get. But it just kind of feels like a bit of a cop-out that they didn't put it in the game, because I like that in the X series.
They had originally planned to have the Zero Ultimate Armor, but they chose not to finish it up and just put it in as a code. And then I'm not sure what the story was with X's Ultimate Armor.
I suppose they decide if they're not going to put in zeros, then they can't really put in X's.
Suppose
It'd be a
not.
little bit unfair, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, overall, I think it's a good game, and I would recommend it. But it's not quite the masterpiece that some people say. I mean, maybe you'll like it and think it is a masterpiece, but for me, it's just a good X game.
I mean, I really like it. I will acknowledge that it is not as good as the original Mega Man X, but then very few of them were.
I still prefer it to X1, but now I'm kind of thinking that maybe X2 is better, at least for me.
We can fight about that another time.
Yeah. Okay, so what did you guys think of it? Good. What about you, Ryan's, Matt? What do you think?
I really didn't like it. I was always going to dislike it, I think. Being a Mega Man game is just not the kind of thing for me.
A lot of my input issues really dropped it down to like a less good game, and I think after I developed kind of a hate relationship with it after struggling with the control and the slight timing differences, I just started getting really nitpicky about the game and finding everything I could find to hate about it. So that's not quite fair. I was not going to say it's a terrible game, but it's definitely, out of the 4 Mega Man X games that I've played, it's number 4.
Yeah, I can understand that. For me, I still like it, but it has its issues. Okay then, so we'll take a break and we'll discuss our favourite picks and the challenges for this month. Okay, so with all that out of the way, let's discuss the challenges that we had and see who managed to beat them. I'll start with my challenge. So mine was first Symphony of the Night, and I wanted you all to beat the boss, Galgamoth, who's in the floating catacombs, and don't use any overpowered weapons like the Chrysogrim or the Alucard's shield. I allowed for accessories and things so you could work out your own strategy, but did anyone manage to beat it?
Yes.
Yes.
I didn't get far enough in the inverted castle to get to him yet.
Okay, so for those who beat it, how did you beat it? Did you use anything special?
I used the barrel circlet, which you probably should have banned on your challenge because it makes lightning attacks heal you. So it was like an absolute cakewalk using that item. I did try it without that, and I couldn't do it at all. But with that one, you just stand in his lightning attacks and it just heals you. It still takes a hell of a long time to chip his health down because he's got a stupid amount of HP. But,
I think he has the highest in the game. Yeah, to be honest, I kind of forgot about the barrel circlet because the version I own is the Saturn version, which is in Japanese. So the barrel circlet I forgot existed because I can't read the description of the items. But still, it's good that you managed to find an item that helped you. Right, so we'll move on to Matt next with Sonic the Hedgehog. What was your challenge?
My challenge was to get 150 rings and then exit the bonus stage, which is it's harder than it sounds. You have a very tight time limit, and you have to get to the exit as well in that time limit while getting the 150 rings. I didn't manage to finish it. My highest was 136. What about you guys?
I consider myself lucky just to get to the bonus stage, so I was nowhere close to this one.
I didn't even get the bonus stage.
I tried a lot of times and I managed to get it. It is possible, At first, I didn't think it was possible because the most I could do was 150, but still be in the ring area and not get to the exit. But after a lot of luck and bouncing around, I kind of figured out a pattern. I set myself certain ring checkpoints for each section and based it on that. I also found that using certain springs helped because if you use I think it's the purple ones that send you quite high. So you've got to avoid the ones that make you jump high and just bounce on the low ones so you can spend all your time collecting rings. And I managed to scrape it with timer at 0 and get to the checkpoint not the checkpoint, the signpost, and finish it. It was tough, but it kind of felt rewarding. I would definitely recommend, at least for you, Matt, to maybe keep trying for it because it is possible, and when you do it, it's quite an experience.
Yeah, I'll keep giving it a go.
Okay, so we'll move on to Stephen. So what was the challenge for X4?
The challenge was to defeat Split Mushroom without taking damage. And when I originally made this, I was still thinking in terms of 0, where it's possible because there's a trick to it. I wasn't thinking about X, where half the bosses can be done without taking damage.
Yeah, I actually did this on my first playthrough as X, and playing with the weakness for Split Mushroom, I pretty much stun-locked him to death and didn't get any damage just by luck. So before we even started this, I already had recorded proof that I'd actually done the challenge.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot more difficult with 0 because, I mean, you say there's a trick, but for my fight with 0, I found it a lot more difficult because I could only hit him when he started moving on the ground.
Basically, it's all timing. It's when he throws out his second illusion, is you start throwing the Raigengeki, and he will fall into your third one, and then jump to the other side.
Ah.
So it takes a little bit more time than with X, but with that trick you can get it, without much difficulty.
So again, this was a challenge where you kind of forgot to take something else into account, kind of like with mine. Never mind.
Yeah, see, when I went through, I managed to beat almost every single boss short of, I think, the Colonel, Sigma, and Megma Dragoon without taking a single hit as 0, and I was just having a hell of a time with Split Mushroom, so I just went ham on him, but definitely took plenty of damage.
I mean, Matt, you were playing rookie mode, so you didn't take damage anyway.
You still take damage on the bosses. You just take half damage.
Yeah.
The Split Mushroom fight, I tried it with X and with 0, and not a chance of me not taking damage on that fight at all, on either of them.
Fair enough. Okay, so Ryan, what was the challenge for Joe and Mac? This was another interesting one.
So Joe and Mac is an interesting game because it's one of the few SNES titles that I know of that actually allows you to remap all of your buttons. But it doesn't take into account that you can map all of your buttons to jump and leave you without a proper attack button. So my challenge was to make it through the first level and beat the boss, having all of your face buttons mapped to jump. Adam, I think you said you got it.
Yeah, I was just waiting to see whether Steve and Matt managed it.
No,
I couldn't work out how to attack.
Well, you can actually attack with the roll. The roll does damage, but it doesn't do a lot of damage. I think it takes like 3 rolls to kill a normal enemy, so yeah, it's not the best. But I found that I was avoiding most of the enemies and just getting to the boss. And the boss is the hard part. You can still damage the boss if you roll into his head, but you also need to do like the upward roll. So you do like a somersault that gets you extra height, and you can land onto a bit of extra platform. Now, the high platform I thought was just for decoration, but it is actually solid. And when you're on there, as soon as his head's near, you can roll into it and deal damage to him. The worst thing about the challenge for me was, while I was trying to figure out what to do, when I died and lost all my lives and continues, on the continue screen it says, do you want to continue? and without an attack button, you can't continue.
Oh.
So if you fail, you have
I
to...
didn't even think about that.
I tried rolling into the egg to continue, and I was just like, shit, I can't continue. Reset this whole thing and remap the fucking buttons again. But yeah, I mean, it is possible, but as Ryan mentioned, it's kind of working out how to do it. But again, it was pretty cool.
I think it was more of a fun thing. I would like to see someone go through the entire game. I don't think you could, because I don't think you could beat the last boss using the roll.
Yeah, I think the bosses are going to be the worst thing because you need to be doing the straight roll. The somersault doesn't seem to do any damage, so...
It doesn't. It's just a high jump.
Yeah, so I think that the bosses are going to be the main sticking point.
Somebody did it with a Guitar Hero guitar.
Yeah, or the Donkey Kong bongos from GameCube. Right, so now we've got the challenges out of the way, we'll talk about our favourite pick. For me, mine was Sonic the Hedgehog. I can't choose my own game because obviously Symphony of the Night would be my pick. But Sonic the Hedgehog, I had a lot of love for as a kid, and replaying it now, I enjoyed it just as much. I find the jungle boss just as frustrating, but I still love that game, and it's one of my favourite Sonic the Hedgehog games, in fact. What about you guys?
Symphony of the Night.
Symphony of the Night.
Was there any close contenders, or was it just a clear victory?
This was just shut and closed. It was so easy to... as soon as I started playing, I'm like, well, this is my favorite. I already know my favorite.
I wouldn't even pick my own game this month.
Same. And I love Joe and Mac. But, yeah.
I mean, Symphony of the Night is regarded as one of the best games of all time, and you know what? I see it.
It's well-deserved.
Definitely. I mean, I think that Symphony of the Night, some people say it's overrated, and I can see the flaws in it, but it is still a masterpiece, and I can definitely understand why for some people it's their favourite game, and I can see why it's in top 10 lists of best games of all time. It really is damn good.
For me, it's the best game that we've covered on the podcast aside from Silent Hill 2. I just fell in love with it. Immediately made its way into my top 5 games of all time, and I just had a really, really good time with the game.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I don't think it could ever get better than Super Monkey Ball Adventure, but Symphony of the Night is still pretty damn close.
That was sarcasm, right?
Yeah, of course it was.
Okay.
Super Monkey Ball Adventure is pretty trash. I do realise that.
I've still got that mint copy if anyone wants it.
No.
I'm good. I already have my own.
I still think it's a good game, but yeah, maybe if one of the listeners is interested, they could send us a message and we might work something out.
But yeah, I mean, this month it was a clear, Symphony of the Night was far and away the best experience.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so with our favourite picks out of the way, we're going to go on to a final quiz, and we also need to announce the winner of our competition for Banjo-Kazooie. So we'll have a little bit of a break, and then we'll lead on to the final part. Okay, well, that was an interesting series of games we've looked at. Let's pass over now to Ryan because we have the winner of our competition for Banjo-Kazooie. So do you want to take it away, Ryan?
We do have a winner, and the winner of the NTSC cartridge and complete with repro case is Lee Cartledge of Kirkby and Ashfield.
Okay, so
congratulations.
Well, yeah, that'll be on its way to you shortly.
Well done.
Right, now that that's over, we'll get on to our quiz. So this time it's a little bit different. It's not a music-based quiz, it's based on quotes from retro video games. Similar to before, I will give you the question and I will randomly pick a person to give me an answer. And then, yeah, we'll base it on trust. If you don't know it, don't steal someone else's answer. Right, let's get started on the first question, and I'll start with an easy one. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. Okay, Stephen, do you want to kick off? Any idea?
That is the original Legend of Zelda.
Okay, and Ryan?
Yeah, it's Legend of Zelda.
Matt?
Yep, Legend of Zelda.
Okay, nice one. Right, question 2. Let's do something a little bit more difficult. All your base are belong to us. Matt, any idea?
I know the meme, but I can't remember the name.
Same.
Stephen, any idea?
No, I don't remember the name of the game.
Ryan?
No, I also know just the meme.
Does anybody know what console it was on?
Mega Drive, I think.
Yep, and the name is Zero Wing. Everybody knows the meme. Nobody seems to know what game.
It's been many years since I looked that up.
I think
Yeah.
Matt deserves half a point for at least knowing the console off the top of his head.
Yeah, but console is going to be 1 or 2, really. I'm not giving the point for that. Right, here's one that you should all know. My patience is wearing thin. I am banishing you to a time warp from which you shall never return. Matt, any idea?
It's very familiar, but I can't place it.
Ryan?
Completely clueless.
Stephen? You should all know this.
I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I feel like it's something we've covered.
It is something with good. It's Turtles in Time.
Oh,
Right. Oh, the part I didn't get to when I played.
It's at the start of the game, I believe.
Yeah,
It's when Shredder sends you back in time.
Yeah, I didn't make it through the Technodrome.
Right, next question. Rise from your grave. Stephen, we'll start with you.
No idea.
Ryan?
I know this, but I can't think of it. And that's a real shame.
Matt, I think you might be more likely.
Yes, Altered Beast.
Altered Beast, that's the one. So a point to Matt. Let's move on to something a little bit different. Take me with you. I'm the one man who knows everything. And I'll give you a clue. This was on the PC. Okay, we'll start with Ryan.
I wasn't big into PC gaming, so
Quite a famous game though, and I think it came out on the Dreamcast and maybe the PS2 as well. I'm not sure.
2 consoles I never owned until recently.
Fair enough. Matt, any idea?
No, I don't recognise that one.
Stephen?
No.
It's Half-Life.
Oh,
It's
that
what
one.
the scientist says before the military guy shoots him.
Yeah, I've never played Half-Life.
The amount of hours I put into that as well.
I need to add that to one of my picks or something in the future. It's a damn good game. Here's something you should all get, I hope. You were almost a Jill sandwich. Matt, any idea?
That is Resident Evil.
Stephen?
Resident Evil 2.
Ryan?
Do not know.
Okay, it's only a point for Matt. It's the original Resident Evil.
Oh, dang it.
Never mind, don't worry. So Matt's in the lead here.
I didn't get to play violent video games when I was a kid.
Okay, we'll choose something a little less violent now. Hopefully you'll have a chance. Hey, Bass, why must I fight you? We are not enemies. Matt?
I know that there's a Mega Man game with an enemy called Bass, but I don't know what the name of that game is.
Any guesses?
Mega Man versus Bass.
Okay. Stephen?
I'm going to guess Mega Man and Bass.
Ryan?
It's one of the later ones because base doesn't show up. It's either Mega Man 7 or 8 because that's when they started doing cutscenes in the Mega Man games. I'm going to say Mega Man 8.
And you'd be correct, it's Mega Man
Oh,
8.
thank God. It was one or the other.
Yeah. Well done, though.
Yay.
Okay, let's do one a little bit more difficult, shall we? Every single day, stress comes in every way. I ain't got no time for nobody. My style is rich, dope, fat in which. We'll make a cake today that looks rich. I'll give you a moment to think about that one.
Wow.
Matt, any clues?
I haven't the faintest idea.
Okay. Ryan?
I am also completely lost.
Stephen?
Not a single clue to be found.
Okay, this is Parappa the Rapper.
Oh, god damn it.
You
I've
played
never
that one, I
played
take
that.
it?
I have played that. It's actually a pretty good game.
Yeah. Okay, let's go back to something a little easier. The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace. We'll start with Stephen, I think.
Is that the original Metroid? Maybe?
Okay, Matt?
I would have said the original Metro because I'm pretty sure I've seen that cutscene on YouTube. I've never actually finished it, but I'm pretty sure I've seen the ending.
Ryan?
That is the beginning of Super Metroid.
Of Super Metroid. Another point for Ryan. Well done.
Can't wait till they all play that. It's such a good game.
I'm looking forward to it.
Here's another one that you should all know, because we've covered this game. You won't catch me, I've made sure. All the credits you'll now endure. Matt, any clue?
That doesn't sound familiar. You say it's one that we've covered?
One we've covered, and that's the clue.
No, it doesn't ring any bells.
Ryan?
Is that Banjo-Kazooie?
Stephen?
That is Banjo-Kazooie.
Ah,
It is
damn it.
Banjo-Kazooie. Point for Stephen and Ryan, well done. Let's do something a little bit more difficult. This one's quite a long one. Don't play dumb with me, Crow. I know everything. I know you use the crystals to travel back to 1994 to tell your younger self to carry on your twisted genetic experiments. Ryan.
Not a clue.
Matt.
I'm really bad at this quiz. I haven't got a clue.
Stephen.
Yeah, I have no idea on this one.
That was Time Splitters.
Ah.
Let's go back to something a little easier. What a horrible night to have a curse. Matt, any clues?
That's Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest.
Ryan?
That is Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, the worst one.
And Stephen?
Same as they, Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest.
Yep, well done. Okay, this one is a little bit trickier, but maybe one of you will know it. Killing a person ain't no big deal. Just put a gun to their head. Pow. Matt.
Silent Hill 2.
Ryan.
Not sure, it's very familiar.
Stephen.
I'm completely clueless on that.
Okay. The correct answer is Silent Hill 2. Well done.
I would have been very disappointed if I'd have got that wrong, considering it's my favourite game.
Right. Let's move on to something. Let's do the tricky one first. Now then, what have we got here? Lovely, lovely little badges for you. Oh.
Do that noise again.
Stephen. I'm not doing the voice again.
I have absolutely no idea.
Ryan?
No idea, but I enjoyed that.
Matt?
Yeah, same. That was a good time, but no, I haven't got a clue.
Jet Force Gemini.
So you haven't played Jet Force Gemini.
Neither have I.
It's quite an unfortunate reference as well, because I don't know if any of you recognise the quote from something outside video games.
Sounded a bit familiar. Maybe I have heard it before.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, you've probably heard of this fella, Jimmy Savile.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was from his TV show. And
Oh, dear.
yeah, it was quite an unfortunate reference in this game because now it's not the best thing to reference, I think. Okay, final one. We have a draw at the moment between Matt and Ryan, so let's hope that one of you gets it wrong and one of you gets it right. I don't have time to play with myself. Matt.
No.
Ryan.
Is that Duke Nukem 3D?
Stephen.
I've not a clue.
The correct answer is Duke Nukem 3D.
Yes!
As soon as Ryan said that, I was like, yeah, of course it is.
Yeah. So Ryan, you had 6 points in the end. Matt was close on his tail with 5 points, and Stephen not too far behind with 3. So Ryan, you're the champion, and you get to choose the console pick for next time. Congratulations.
Yay!
And that's it from all of us for this time, so we'll see you with whatever Ryan decides to pick. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Peace.